Well, hello, good day. How are you all? I hope very well. And it's a beautiful wintry day outside. I say beautiful day because it started like pea soup with the fog out there this morning. So it wasn't freezing. There was no ice or frost, and it wasn't bitter, but it was very atmospheric, and it really made everything feel a lot more festive. Obviously this video is a little bit late, as is now customary, but I will get back to normal soon, I promise. It is a garden week, and some might think that we don't really garden in the winter, but that's not true, because there is still stuff in the garden that can be harvested, little bits and bobs, nothing really major, because I haven't focused a huge amount this year on getting stuff in the garden to be harvested through the winter, or mega stuff to be harvested and stored for the winter. So I haven't got to that stage yet, but I am getting there. But I did harvest the Mashua and the Yakon, as I told you not long ago. It wasn't a very successful crop this year. We had a funny year. It started off absolutely brilliantly. We had a fantastic start to the summer. It was really brilliant. And then by the end of the summer, coming up to autumn, it just suddenly changed, and it got much wetter and colder, and it was not very good. So the harvests were not that brilliant. I'll show you that in a minute and what I've done with it, but there's also other gardening that can be going on during the winter. A bit of indoor gardening, that's just the ticket. And of course, I had actually been neglecting my houseplants for a little bit because I'd been so busy with getting craft stuff ready. So this week was a perfect opportunity just to quickly, as I was going to get all my Christmas decorations out, I decided, well, if they're going on there, I'm going to tidy up all the houseplants that I have. And I still got a few more on the windowsills up the stairs and on the other living room windowsill. They just needed watering and looking after, but most of these over here needed transplanting and feeding and watering, and just the tender loving care that plants need, and taking out any dry or dead material just to stop any disease or pests being encouraged. So that is a bit of indoor gardening done that you could do all year round. So still gardening, even if not outside. So that means that even if you don't have an outdoor garden or even a balcony, there is still some kind of gardening you could do indoors, even if you're in a flat. So here it is. Excuse the crafty bits. I'm not quite done yet. By the end of today, I hopefully will be. But here is the Yakon and the Mashua that I wanted to show you. The ochre was absolutely useless. Well, there was a handful, a small little bowl of ochre that I had, and I have one surviving bulb because darling Buttons discovered my harvest and ate the lot. I saved one tuber, one ochre tuber, and it's slightly damaged, but it dried nicely. It still looks healthy enough. So I'm going to replant that. I'm going to overwinter it just like the Mashua and the Yakon, and I'm going to see if it'll survive. I'll have to order some more because I want some more, and they look pretty good as a harvest of an alternative food. So there you are. Ochre was useless, but the Mashua I had left a little bit long before I harvested it. So as a result, there are some roots still attached to them. So I'm going to overwinter those. There's still roots attached to these as well. So I'm going to put them back in soil, and I'll just overwinter them in slightly moist soil. And the only ones that I could really eat, there's a couple more in the tub still. Here's another root ball with some on there. I can get that one off, but I'll put that back in the ground. I think there's more in, yeah, there's more in there. So I might, oh, there you go. It's another one. That one I'm going to put back in because it's got a nice thick neck on the root. And there are still some tiny little ones in there. So them I will just put straight back in a pot. Just as it is, I'm going to put it back in a pot and see how they go. And this one, and there's a few more in the pot out in the kitchen that I'll do it. And that's where I was doing the work actually, these as well. I'm going to put them all back in the pots. So I will use these and whatever's in the other pots in a meal, an experiment and try them. And the rest I will overwinter to keep going. Because obviously the Mashua, being a bit like related to nasturtiums, they make fantastic plants, climbing plants. So they will have beautiful flowers, almost exactly like nasturtium flowers, the same shaped leaves. So they're great, and they're edible too, as far as the flowers and the leaves go, just like nasturtium. So with these, at least you get the tuber as well. So that's a handy crop to have, an alternative crop. The ones I had in the front garden did not like the front garden at all. It needed more shelter, and it needs a moist bit of soil. It can't go in pots, it has to go in the soil. And I was just a bit afraid of putting it in the soil and having it dug up by animals or completely overwhelmed by other plants. So I'll think of something. I'll come up with some way that I can grow them in the ground somewhere and just leave them to ramble and climb where they like. The Yakon, these two are almost the biggest that I got off this harvest, and that's still small because I've usually had them 3 times this size in length and width. They're usually much bigger than that. So that they grow on the plant like that. And then I take them off the plant. And so this is the bit that you use and eat if you're not already familiar with Yakon. And then these bulbils here, as you can see here, that is one new plant for next year and another there. So I have a couple of these stalks, another 2 I think, with a couple of these plants, and them I will overwinter on a windowsill in a pot with slightly damp compost and just keep it there. I don't want it to rot, so I don't want it wet and cold. Just, but the windowsills in the house tend to dry out a bit quick, so I'll have to keep an eye on them. I'll cover the pot with a bit of plastic as I've got mini propagators actually. I'll put them on there. So that will overwinter them for the winter, and next year hopefully I should get a better harvest of Yakon than I had this year. So that's 2 unusual vegetables that I grew this year. It wasn't a great success, but a good enough success to keep me going until next year, when I might be able to do something more focused in the garden and more intentional as far as preparing for winter crops. So I won't just be harvesting through the year for the year, but I will also be doing some more preparation gardening for winter, and that's both stuff to store and stuff to harvest through the winter. And I'm really happy with that. So that's still gardening, almost, the first week of December. So the one thing I have been disappointed with is that the spinach that I grew from seed, that was growing so well in September and October, has been totally overwhelmed by the slugs. They didn't stand a chance. So I think I'll start them off earlier next year so that I can have much stronger, bigger, bushier plants to withstand any slug attacks. And hopefully we'll have more frogs next year as well, because there has one that has taken up residence in the garden, and hopefully it'll come back with a partner next year, and we'll have lots of frog spawn in the pond and lots of frogs to eat all those slugs. It would be lovely if I could find a hedgehog that wanted to live in this garden. I'll have to make a hedgehog corner in the back of the garden behind the composters, and hopefully someone will take up residence there and be happy to help us with the slug population while the frogs are still finding their way to settle here as well. Yeah. Hopefully the blackbirds will get stuck into the snails, because I know the blackbirds eat the snails, but it's the frogs and the hedgehogs that eat the slugs. So we hope. And I mean the devil's coach horse insects, little black ones, they look quite intimidating and scary really. And I have actually been pinched by the pincers of one many years ago. I didn't know what it was back then, but I'm really glad I didn't hurt it. I don't remember, but I'm sure I didn't hurt it. I just flung it out of the way because it bit me, so to speak. But I have actually seen one of them with a baby slug in their mouth, in the pincers. So they're also good slug eaters, I believe, from what I've seen of that one coachman, devil's coach horse insect. It looks a bit like an earwig, but is bigger, blacker, flatter, and much heavier. And I've seen one with a slug in its pincers. So yeah, we like those, and I like that there's enough natural aspect to my garden that encourages the wildlife. So I'm really happy with that. And I will also be tidying up the annual bed so that there's no places for slugs to hide. So no stones, no planks, no edgings of the beds, anything like that. I will try to eliminate those sorts of elements immediately around the vegetable beds, the annual vegetable beds. Around the perennial beds, it's fair game because that's where the wildlife will hide and consume the pests. So we'll do our best. I haven't trimmed the hydrangea. I don't know if you can see it out the window just there. I haven't trimmed the hydrangea this year at all because, as you can see underneath there, on the leaves, on the strawberry leaves, there's bird feces, there's bird droppings. The house sparrows are still using the hydrangea. They're still hiding and sheltering in there and finding food. So I am loath to cut it down just yet. I know it looks a mess, but the wildlife is still using it. I have been dumping the dust from the house all over the garden. It'll just add to the mulch and rot away with the dog hair, because that's a biodegradable material anyway. The rhubarb have finally gone to bed. I'll put some more straw on there just to cover it for the winter. My ornamental cabbages are completely gone. The carnations, though, are still flowering. Not very well, of course, with the cold, but we've had some lovely surprises. Look, poached eggplant. That's not supposed to come up yet in the winter. That's supposed to come up in the spring and the summer. The peony is still surviving over there. It's overwintering. There's still some lovely fresh dandelion leaves, still usable. The gladioli hopefully will survive. We have bulbs looking a bit exposed there, and they're only supposed to come up in the spring, so I'm going to have to cover them up with more compost. Everything else is going to sleep except for the perennials. The sage is doing really well still. Hopefully that will last through the winter and not die. We're still doing okay. Senecio, I was surprised by that. I didn't think it would stand any frost, and we had quite a hard frost. Chicory didn't even flower. It didn't even flower this year. I am so pleased with that, though. The Senetti, it's self-seeded, and I'm hoping that it will survive the winter. I'm hoping that aronia berry bush over there is, even though it's wispy, I'm hoping it'll give it just enough shelter from the wind. We have fresh herb robert coming up everywhere, and if we do get flowers, I shall still be harvesting it. The lady's bed straw is still spreading. I'm hoping it just continues to do so. We still have flowers on the passion flowers. New roses in December, and you know why? I'm sure it's to do with a compost pile there heating the soil underneath. The strawberries are absolutely running rampant everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So all of this in the path and some in the beds will be put into the troughs I'm going to make for the upright strawberry planter for next year. I still have some calendula there. I can still harvest some of those for salad, for flowers. And the lamb's lettuce. I'm excited about the lilac. It's still little over there, and the yellow lilac over here, just next to the comfrey there. They've got fresh new buds on, so they have survived, and I'm very happy about that. In the back, I still have some nasturtiums there, some pea shoots to harvest for salad. The Cape gooseberries, I need to check they still got just enough moisture, but they're overwintering. Most people would treat them as annuals, but I believe that they're actually perennials if kept in the right conditions. So hopefully, if I put one of those small propagator lids on it with a little thing on the top open, it could still ventilate and not get too damp, but it'll keep the top from rotting away and dying, and hopefully I could put it in another pot to keep a little bit of insulation in. There's still catnip I can harvest over there because it's not quite died down yet, so I can harvest a bit of that. And there's new bits around the base of the plant, so it's really taken root in the polystyrene tub. The lobelia is still going, and there's still a lettuce plant behind it. The cyclamen is not doing well, and I believe I would have some vine weevils in there that are eating the roots, because I found some in the other pots. Fennel, look at that, new fennel bulbs growing on the side of that one. So I can earth up a little there, and I'll cut it right the way down to there, because I've got new bulbs coming up everywhere, and I'll just harvest them, very little small ones, and have them fresh in salad or use them in tea or stews. This one, as I told you before, is my acabia, my chocolate vine. This is an experiment. I doubt I will get any fruit because it needs a companion to cross-pollinate, but we have it, it'll be impressive, and I'm sure I'll get flowers even if I don't get fruit. The leeks are not surviving very well. I think some of the slugs are eating some of them as well because they're still so young. You can barely see them. And of course they're not going to be growing through the winter, they're just going to be overwintering there. The onions have done a great deal more than the leeks. So I'm going to plant more onions. I really am. The birds, oh my gosh, look at the birds. They've been digging up my garden and exposing the mycelium. Look at that. Naughty little things. I'm going to have to put some more compost over those. I still have chamomile growing, so I can still harvest some of those leaves for my herons. And the feverfew I'm going to transplant because I don't want them there. This is an annual bed, so the feverfew will have to go. These lamb's lettuce is now ready to go to flower and seed. So if I can grab some of the seed heads before they just self-seed everywhere, I might be able to deliberately sow. And the sweet peas are also still flowering. I don't think they're very strongly scented. They're not very strongly scented. I've still got some pods on here with seeds, so I can take them off before it gets wet, and I'll save them for next year. And I'll grow loads of them in the front garden, I think. So while they are, I'm going to leave them where they are. I'm not going to do anything yet. There's a new snapdragon plant. I'm going to keep that going. Of this one, which is finished flowering now, I'm going to harvest some of these seed pods because there's still some in there. But I will cut it away because that's new growth over there. So I'll cut everything else away and leave the new growth. The Aquilegia is going to come out of there, go in the front, as is the comfrey as well, because that is spreading, but I don't want it here. That's a slug harbour for slugs, so it's going to go in the front garden with all the perennials, the hardier perennials, because it's just a place for slugs to hide. The blackcurrant has been given a good cut, so that'll be okay. As to the rest of the garden, everything overwintering. The leaves are finally off the cherry tree, so I can give it a good pruning now. I'll cut out what we wanted to use for the wood walking staff, and thin it out and train it, so that hopefully we'll be able to protect it more next year and actually get some fruit. Now, anyway, that where the Sagittaria duck potatoes, the wapatos are, that I have to empty the water out. I will fish out any of the bulbs that I can and overwinter them in compost, slightly moist compost for the winter, so that they don't die, because they don't like frost. The only little figlet we had on the fig plant has dropped off, but everything else seems to be doing okay. Even the roses, I'm still getting flowers off those roses. But somehow in this garden, all of the roses change from their original colour. They're not the same. I can't figure that one out. Those were beautiful purple roses, very highly scented. There's loads of new rose bulb flowers on there, buds, but they're not purple. Alright, I better go, lovelies. This battery's flashing at me, it's going to die any second. So this is an update for December in the garden. Nothing in the school garden. I've done a little bit of sheet mulching in the secret garden, and that's about it. There's not a huge amount going on in the garden in December. But that's it, lovelies. It's going to die on me now. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever the season. Keep gardening, and I shall speak to you again soon. Bye bye.